Hello and welcome to the X-Perts, your exceptional guides to all things X-Men. I am Jeremy.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. Unfortunately, Joanna couldn't make it this evening. Jesse, how are you doing?
Oh, it's been boring today.
Has it?
Yeah.
Well, what makes it boring?
I did absolutely nothing today.
Oh, okay. I know the feeling.
Yeah.
No, I was at work today, man. I was back after a small break and life moved at a different speed. I did some wrestling training on Saturday, and unfortunately today is a day where I remember the one thing I was hoping to learn that I just forgot to ask.
That is?
I want to know how to take a DDT. It's a very simple thing, I know, but I'd like to be shown how to do it to make sure I don't accidentally cause injury. In this case, more likely to myself. But still, I feel like it's a good question to ask. You know, I hate to just assume I do it correctly and then wind up doing something massive to my neck. That would be horrible. But, hey, life is the way it is. Hopefully I know somebody else who can give me a few pointers later on. We came in this week to discuss X-Men's Inferno. This is an event from 1988 to 1989. And, this would be the first year I was really buying X-Men comics on the regular, as well as X-Factor. And I admit to not having a full picture as to what all was going on.
My interest in comics at that time was non-existent.
I had it, but I mean, Transformers was really winding down in Marvel Comics at this point. They way outlasted the cartoon series. So I was just looking for something else, and this all looked interesting, and I was having trouble trying to understand everything as it was happening, especially since when I dropped in was in the middle of the Inferno event. This had already been going on for several months before I got involved. The publication date of the totality of what was happening in Inferno happened from October of 1988 to August of 1989. 10 months of comic books. And if that wasn't complicated enough, this was a company-wide event that happened in most of the mutant titles going on at the time. Uncanny X-Men, X-Factor, the Exterminators miniseries, Excalibur, and the New Mutants. This was written by Louis Simonson, Chris Claremont, Steve Englehart, Jerry Conway, David Michelin, Ann Nocenti, Walter Simonson, John Bogdanine, Terry Austin, and Juliana Jones. That sounds complicated already.
That's a lot of names.
It is. It's a lot of notable ones, too. And Inferno had a very similar tenor to The Fall of the Mutants in that, in the beginning, it was a whole lot of events happening that had light touches in each other's storylines without the main characters actually meeting each other for the majority of at least the first half of this. A lot of it centered around the X-Men during the late 80s, and two demons from the alternative dimension of Limbo hatched a plot. Limbo is the dimension that Illyana Rasputin's mutant-generated teleportation discs would jump through when she was teleporting from place to place. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't a direct place-to-place transporter. She had to make a stopover in Limbo before she moved on to wherever she was heading.
Similar to Nightcrawler, right?
Sort of, except Nightcrawler's... Okay, so Nightcrawler's would be more like a parabola. His teleportation field somehow dips him into a different dimension, but he's through there so quickly he doesn't even perceive it. To him, it feels more like point-to-point teleportation. Magic was more like a point A to point B to point C type of teleportation. She would start somewhere on Earth. She would have to open up the portal in Limbo. Then from there, she'd have to open a portal from Limbo to the point she wanted to end up on Earth. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So there were times where she spent not longer points in Limbo, but it just became a logical stopping point. And Limbo is very complicated when it comes to Magic's history. Originally in the comic books, her older brother, Colossus, was a full-fledged mutant and member of the X-Men. She was a young child. And she was kidnapped by the by the denizens of Limbo, who appear to be demons for all intents and purposes. They practice magic, they have the pointy ears and the long tails and all that stuff, sharp teeth.
Mm-hmm.
But the head of Limbo, a demon named Belasco, who very much looks like a svelte version of the devil, became interested in Illyana not just because of her powers, but because of her possibilities. She apparently had an innate ability to perform magic by removing parts of a human soul, turning those into gemstones, and then bonding them into an amulet of sorts.
That's some really dark stuff there.
It is, but it comes with a bit of a side effect, because the person that holds that amulet can use the sections of the person's soul, and they can manifest those sections as weapons. That's where the soul sword that Illyana carries comes from. Before she was freed from Limbo, and to the X-Men it was a short amount of time, but to her, she went from adolescent to teenage years, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But in the time of her initial training, 3/5 of her soul was removed and placed into an amulet.
Wow.
That's why she has that long sword. That's also why when something similar happened to Pixie, one section of her soul was removed and put in an amulet, but she only has a soul dagger. It's not as much of her soul in use. It's not as powerful, but in the end, I think it may be more preferable. And also, Pixie didn't have this forcibly done to her. She volunteered to do it so that Magic could teach her teleportation magic. That's another story, I'm sure. So, we don't have to get too deep into that. But anyway, two demons from the Limbo dimension, known as Sim and Nastier. And it's spelled phonetically, so it's not precisely what you're thinking of. They want to invade Earth. They want to take the realm for themselves. And the plan revolves around Illyana Rasputin and using her power because it allows her to open passages between Limbo and Earth. So during one of the New Mutants adventures, during a routine stopover in Limbo, Nastier casts a spell blocking Illyana's teleportation abilities. So the New Mutants are trapped in Limbo. And Sim, who's taking control of Limbo's hordes and armies, he wants to kill the New Mutants to prove to the others that he is in charge, and he can claim Limbo. Because she's being attacked by Sim, Illyana assumes that Sim is the person who cast the spell trapping them there, so when Nastier starts giving her advice, she doesn't distrust Nastier. And if you're asking why she would do something so plainly obvious, or follow something like that, I remind you that she is a teenager. She just plain doesn't know better. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, Nastier advises that the New Mutants can return to Earth by Illyana embracing her demonic power, all the abilities that Belasco taught her. And she does so, and it allows her to open a gateway to Manhattan. But Nastier already had a bizarre computer, a spellcasting computer built for him by another mutant he's already kidnapped. It's a kid called WizKid from the Exterminators team. Once Illyana opened the gate, the computer pretty much jams the gateway open. So suddenly there's an open portal between Limbo and Earth that will not close. And Limbo begins pouring through it. Okay? Now, if you're asking who the heck the Exterminators are, this is where it gets a little long. So, the Exterminators were the original alter ego of X-Factor. Remember when we were talking about Angel's origins? X-Factor's first version, they presented themselves as mutant trappers?
Yeah.
That was the organization called X-Factor. But when the members of X-Factor wanted to do superheroics instead of pretending to be mutant hunters, they got dressed in different outfits and called themselves the Exterminators. Okay? Now, eventually it was revealed that the Exterminators and X-Factor were one and the same. So the name Exterminators just kind of fell dormant. Eventually, a group of kids at X-Factor had rescued, namely Rusty Collins, Skids Belvins, Boom Boom, Richter, and Leech and Artie, as well as this new kid, WizKid, who is from I believe, a boarding school. They pick up the name Exterminators not long after Inferno starts. And I say starts because while they were still trying to acclimate themselves to the different schools X-Factor dropped them off at, suddenly demons started to kidnap infants.
That's not good.
Never typically is. It's very clear that these small demons are looking specifically for babies, but they don't seem to know why. And they thought that Leech and Artie, since they were small and hairless, fit the description of baby, so they specifically took them as well, unfortunately. WizKid is a kid that Leech and Artie met. He's a genius, but he's a trust fund kid because his parents died in an accident that also put him in a wheelchair. What he finds out, though, is that he has an unusual ability to change any matter he's in contact with. If he touches it, he can pretty much repurpose it and turn it into the kind of object he needs. He changed his chair into like a helicopter chair so he could try to follow him, but he realized he had no power source for it, so he managed to grab a garbage can and use his technical knowledge to turn to a generator or engine so that he could power it.
Okay.
Yeah, he's very bright, but he's very unpracticed, and it requires him to be in physical contact with whatever he has to transform. So this is the kid that was kidnapped and forced to build a spellcasting computer. I imagine he needed a lot of help from the demons of Limbo to know how spellcasting works. But anyway, with the portal forced open, Limbo seeping into the Marvel Universe isn't as obvious as you think. There wasn't a pillar of fire in the sky. Pentagrams did not just suddenly appear on the street or anything like that. It started out a little more subtly, in that inanimate objects started to transform and become not just animated, but devouring things. And people.
Like mimics?
Yes. It wasn't on a large scale. It was one of those things that happened in the background. I was rereading early sections of Inferno, like the early tie-ins, and it was things like Beast and Iceman trying to tackle a mailbox that had suddenly gone out of control. It was, yeah, there was a minor heat wave running, so everything was not unnaturally, but just annoyingly hot. Things like that were occurring. So there wasn't enough to make anyone think that anything super unusual was happening until it was really too late. And the early parts of Inferno, you could see little signs of it occurring in the comic books of the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Power Pack, and Spider-Man. And in Spider-Man, things probably got pretty extreme for him because, the Hobgoblin, Roderick Kingsley?
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who dresses and works a lot like the Green Goblin, just not crazy, right?
Yeah.
He got demonically possessed.
Oh.
That Hobgoblin face, that became his face.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So, a lot of the residents of Manhattan, though, this is one of those cases where when things get weird so long, nobody treats the unusual as anything to be really afraid of. Apparently, most of the residents of Manhattan were so used to the strange things happening in the Marvel Universe that they just kind of rolled with the unusual things happening in the city. Buses were still running under an all-volunteer force because it seemed like the bus drivers were either disappearing or getting devoured by different things, or even transforming into demons. Subways were still functioning and people were riding them calmly, even as some flew through portals into hell. Stores still sold products, helicopter tours still ran. I imagine the helicopter started to scream every once in a while. Things like that.
So, either A Turbulence or they're just waiting for the hero to come in and solve the problem.
Pretty much. I mean, New York, right?
Yeah.
In the meantime, Nastier has found himself a new ally that I bet even he didn't thought he would find a compatible soul with. And that is the X-Men's sidekick is not the right word, administrator is not the right word, just kind of a hangabout who's with the team because she has nowhere else to be right now.
Jubilee?
Madeline Pryor.
Oh, boy.
See, when Jean Grey was shown to not have died at the end of the Dark Phoenix saga, Cyclops left Madeline Pryor, who he had married, who had an uncanny resemblance to Jean Grey. Most of the X-Men noted that she looked strangely like Jean Grey. So to them, it wasn't a big surprise when Cyclops married her,
Mm-hmm.
Had a child with her. But when Cyclops found out Jean Grey was alive, he left her. Hey, I'm a Cyclops fan. I'm not going to defend this. It was a strange move.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, at some point that I don't know, Madeline Pryor abandoned her son to an orphanage, and she just started to follow the X-Men. But when Nastier contacted her, Nastier agreed to locate her son and manipulate the X-Men into killing the Marauders, who she had something oddly personal with. In exchange, she was supposed to cast a spell that would make the portal between Earth and Limbo permanent. Okay?
Right.
So, to keep his end of the bargain, Nastier altered the X-Men's computer systems at their Outback base, the former Reavers base, so that they could use them to locate the Marauders. And then, Nastier also used his abilities to kind of tweak the X-Men's bloodthirst to make them just want to rip the Marauders apart. And most of the Marauders did die in the ensuing fight between the teams. The only one who's unaffected by this spell corrupting them? Colossus.
Really?
Yeah, he wasn't spending a whole lot of time in his normal human form. He spent a lot of his time in his organic steel form at that point. And because of his organic steel, he was just generally being unaffected by the magics around him.
Magic did have some interesting, weird relationship to iron in general.
That's a fair point. I never thought about it in that terms.
Yeah.
But Colossus finally realizes that they're being controlled and corrupted, and his conclusion is that the only way to free the X-Men from the influence of the spellcasting is by saving his sister, who must be at the center of this somehow. I mean, he's aware enough that she's a spellcaster. In the meantime, Nastier fills the second part of his bargain with Madeline Pryor. He finds Nathan Summers. Except it's probably not in a place even Nastier expected to find it. Nathan Summers was in the laboratory of Mister Sinister.
Why am I not surprised?
Why would you be? This is what Madeline Pryor was created for. It's this story where Pryor finds out that she is a clone of Jean Grey. Drink that in for a second.
It's, for as much as cliche and comic book as, clone of so-and-so, how did the X-Men manage to make it work without making it sound boring?
I think it had to do with the time period. We're talking the late 80s when cloning was still a relatively high sci-fi concept instead of the cliche it became. There's also the idea that makes Madeline Pryor an exact duplicate of one of the most powerful telepathic and telekinetic minds on the planet. Which in and of itself should be scary. I mean, we're talking about a jilted, not mentally unstable, but at very least mentally traumatized woman with that wealth of power that she's probably just discovering she has. Right now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That also means that Nathan Summers is the functional son of Cyclops and Jean Grey, two extremely powerful characters.
That's exactly what Sinister wanted.
Yes. And it's also the reason why she was called Madeline Pryor. She was Jean Grey prior to her knowledge of her own abilities. So anyway, Nastier and Sim are both pretty much getting what they want from this. They're starting to invade Earth, and if there's one thing that pretty much commonplace in writings involving demons is that they can't even trust each other, right?
Yeah.
So Nastier and Sim start fighting each other for the leadership of Limbo's forces. Sim gets the upper hand, but Nastier wants victory so badly that he allows himself to be infected by something that even the X-Men don't like to get infected by.
Technovirus?
Yes. He allows himself to be infected with the transmode virus. Then, Nastier takes the extra step of merging himself with that spellcasting computer he had built for him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so his magical powers increase exponentially, and Nastier himself is able to make a permanent bridge between Limbo and Earth without the help of Madeline Pryor. But WizKid destroys Nastier he destroys, I should say, the computer he built before Nastier can make use of it. The explosion reduces Nastier to absolute ashes. However, he's infected with a transmode virus, so he's able to rebuild himself. So, fast forward a bit, the X-Men are still trying to understand what's going on, and Colossus has caught up with Illyana Rasputin. And he's horrified to see that she is so completely absorbed by her demonic side that she's covered by eldritch armor, her legs have gone cloven, and she's grown a tail, as well as horns.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Illyana is so shell-shocked by Colossus' reaction to her, she flees into Limbo and decides to end the demonic invasion by taking the throne of Limbo herself. Big step.
Yeah, go straight for the head.
Yeah. She actually is talked out of this by her teammate, Rainey Sinclair, Wolfsbane.
Oh, okay.
So instead, Illyana takes another step that's probably even more dangerous in taking the throne of Limbo. She creates a massive teleportation portal that throws most of the demons on Earth back into Limbo, including Sim, and then throws her own soul sword in after them into the portal to seal it shut. And that's when Illyana, inside her Eldritch armor, suddenly collapses. And this is where it gets kind of weird, because Colossus runs forward and starts peeling apart this armor to save his sister. She's alive in there, but she's 7 years old again.
That's gonna be weird.
Yeah, it was one of those storylines that never really quite got a resolution. She didn't grow into adulthood because she died as a result of the legacy virus about 6 or 7 years later. But at the same time, she was a teenager. She had some of the memories of the magic version of herself, the New Mutant, but not all of them. So she was a happy-go-lucky child, but she had a lot of nightmares growing up. Well, she did. I mean, like I said, she died. She was eventually reborn as part of Belasco just pining for his top lieutenant in Project to come back. Except he only managed to, because the human died, he only managed to rebirth the demon parts. The 3/5 of the soul he had already claimed in the Soul Stones. That is the magic running around today.
The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
She wouldn't be controlled by Belasco. She knows that she has a brother and everything, but she still has trouble forming a lot of emotional connections you would expect. That's why she tends to respond to things very strangely compared to a lot of other people. Let me put it this way. After she was rebirthed and allowed back on Utopia during that era of the X-Men, you remember Anole, the lizard-like kid who was able to like regrow limbs once they were removed from his body?
No, not familiar with that character.
Okay. Anyway, the kids of Utopia were learning how to farm to make the island self-sustainable, so they wouldn't have to, like, grocery shop in case things went badly.
Mm-hmm.
Anole was complaining so much about having to grow his own food. Magic dropped him through a portal into Limbo. And let him fend for himself. To her, she was gone to human or to Earth in time, he was gone about 90 minutes. To Anole, he was gone 2 months. When he came back, he was haggard, he was starving, but he did not complain about growing food anymore.
No.
You know, I wouldn't even say that she taught him the right lesson, but it was just, this is how magic deals with people now. This is her way of teaching a lesson.
I'm trying to find the right words to describe what she's doing.
Sociopathic would be a good start.
School of Hard Knocks. How about that one?
Well, that's Xavier's in general. That's almost like saying, look, I know you're hungry. Learn to eat your hand before you kill yourself, would you? She is... This is the woman who will not hand over the coffee. And then you can imagine why Sunspot would not take the coffee pot from her now, right?
She could be a bit brutal.
Yeah. So, going back to Inferno. Illyana's actions have banished all demons native to Limbo, except for one who's managed to stay behind. Nastier, who's still infected with the transmode virus. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Further on, because Nastier is still there, preventing the spell from being broken, people and objects who have been demonically possessed are still uncured. So this is still an active problem. Nastier is eventually destroyed by the combined efforts of the X-Men and X-Factor. X-Factor has finally permanently learned that the X-Men are still alive after the fall of the mutants. But Madeline Pryor maintains the Inferno spell herself. She has fully absorbed the idea of being the Goblin Queen with everything she's learned. And the only way to keep the spell open permanently is to kill her son as a demonic sacrifice, Nathan Summers.
Oh.
Yeah. And she is forced to confront not just her ex-husband who's come for his son, he's been looking for him for quite a while, okay? She also confronts the woman he left her for.
Oh, she came back.
Yeah, well, she's already been back, but Jean Grey and Madeline Pryor are meeting for the first time ever. And Madeline Pryor is discovering her telepathic abilities and forcibly links herself to Jean Grey's mind and shares the entirety of her life, including the fact that she just learned that she's a clone of this woman. Probably like the worst episode of Real Housewives of Orange County ever. So the X-Men and X-Factor break through the Goblin Queen's defenses and they grab Nathan Summers. He's finally safe. But in a final... At this point, because we know the characters come back several times, at this point, what was supposed to be her final act, Madeline Pryor uses her powers and wills herself to die, but will not break the connection with Jean Grey. She's trying to drag her into death with her. But as Madeline dies, something that was dormant within Madeline awakens itself and offers to save Jean Grey.
The Phoenix?
A small part of it.
Damn.
Yeah. And you can imagine how horrific this is for Jean Grey. She's probably been trying to get away from the idea that she and the Phoenix are the same thing for so long, and yet this may be the only way for her to save herself. Frustrating, right?
Yeah.
And Grey doesn't have many choices at this moment, so she agrees to this Faustian deal. So she doesn't have the entirety of the Phoenix Force, but she does have a segment of it all of a sudden. At this point, Excalibur exists and Rachel Summers is on Earth. She is the one in control of the Phoenix Force. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But, now that the Goblin Queen has passed away, New York finally returns to normal. And New York is so just kind of group traumatized. Somehow most of the city believes that the events of Inferno are some kind of massive group delusion, that it just couldn't be real. It's like the only way New York can process this well enough to go on with its society and its life.
Put up their own defenses to keep themselves sane.
You know, it sounds weird, but it's a much better ending than a wish-away thing. I mean, at least it actually happened. They just can't process it. However, some things just do not go back to normal. Certain members of the X-Men are still dealing with the idea of, or dealing with the corruption and the deficiencies it caused them to see in themselves. Dazzler and Longshot are desperate for the limelight that they feel like they deserve, but have never gotten with the X-Men. Psylocke is feeling inadequate because of her inability to defend herself physically. She's wearing that pink and purple armor at this point. You know, Havoc feels very dejected because the woman he loved, his brother's ex-wife, is suddenly dead, and yet her face is still just hanging around with Jean Grey, and it annoys the hell out of him. Cyclops suddenly gets everything he wants. Havoc has nothing.
Gee.
You see where this is going.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the person you think is the most screwed up in this situation is actually the guy dealing with it the best, and that's Warren Worthington, who has returned to X-Factor, complete with his Archangel abilities, and the demons of Limbo are somehow making him not feel like the worst person in the world right now.
Yeah, he's found... No, this well goes a bit deeper, and I'm not there.
Yeah, but
Yay!
something else happened here. Because of the mind link between Madeline Pryor and Jean Grey, Madeline's personality and most of her memories exist within Jean Grey's mind. Not as a separate entity, but it's almost like Jean Grey's relearning a part of herself that she feels like she just never had before. And part of those memories involved where to find Mister Sinister.
Oh.
Now that, combined with the aspect of Madeline's personality that's starting to, integrate itself into her mind, Jean's feeling a massive need to get back at this guy, right? Would you like to know where Sinister... Huh?
Who would it?
Yeah. Would you like to know where Sinister was hiding?
Under the mansion?
No. In it. Remember, X-Factor is based out of New York City at this point in their own offices. The X-Men are hiding in the outback of Australia. The Xavier Institute was closed and empty.
Oh.
So, the X-Men and X-Factor went to the Institute to try to confront Sinister. And when they get on the grounds, Sinister blows the whole thing up.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, there are no massive injuries, but several members of both teams are knocked out. Another fracas ensues. There was a massive fight, but it basically came down to Mister Sinister and Cyclops. And believe it or not, Sinister fears Cyclops quite a bit. Would you like to know why?
I believe his optic blast can actually do him harm?
His optic blasts are the only thing that can do Sinister permanent harm.
Yeah, that's the one thing I do remember from the old 92 show.
Yeah, now, I want you to picture this, though. Cyclops is confronting the man who created the woman that he replaced Jean Grey with, who was holding his infant son, and is basically responsible for the last decade of hell he has been through. The blast that Cyclops unleashed reduced Sinister to ashes. You would think that'd be final, except Sinister clones more easily than he does anything else with his life.
Yeah.
So, there was another one of him out there somewhere. But in that moment, back in the 80s, I remember reading that as a kid just going, wow, I am not used to superheroes doing all this.
There wasn't a mountain that was going to stop Cyclops from getting that man.
Oh, no. No. I mean, it was bad enough that Jean Grey wanted Sinister's head on a pike in that moment. But when Cyclops really learned the gravity of everything that happened and how Sinister had a direct cause to half of Inferno, as well as a lot of the personal strife he'd been going through since X-Factor was really formed, he'd had it. This was a lot of characters who broke out of their comfort zones. And Inferno actually did have long-lasting consequences for a lot of these characters. I mean, Archangel, prior to Inferno, he found out about Cameron Hodge, lobotomizing Candy Southern and basically killing her before his eyes. That's where he beheaded this guy at. And yet somehow Inferno made him feel wanted and needed enough that he could rejoin X-Factor, even though he was still wearing all the same... he was wearing the same outfit Apocalypse gave him when he turned him into the Horseman of Death at this point. That's a big step.
Yeah.
And it's also where Beast regained his blue furry form. It's where Wolverine really cut loose with his murderous instincts because of the spell Nastier was putting him under. It's also one of the main reasons Longshot left the X-Men not long afterwards, because the events of Inferno made him realize he never really felt like a complete person. And Longshot's history is kind of complicated because he technically has never been a complete person. He's more or less a created biological weapon to do things for particular people and run a revolution against Mojo's forces in the Mojoverse. So he just realized how just inadequate he felt, and then he went off to find himself. And he never really came back to the X-Men anyway. I get the feeling that people would like to do stuff with Longshot, but it's kind of hard to do when the character has little by way of a functional history, and his primary power is luck, throwing knives, and a mullet.
Don't we have Domino for that?
Domino doesn't have a mullet. How dare you? But, no, Inferno, I was going through the Marvel Masterwork. It's a collected version of the Inferno book.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even get halfway through it in the last 2 weeks. Combination of me being busy and the fact that the Inferno trade is almost 600 issues of pages. Or 600 pages of story, I should say.
That's a lot of paper.
It is tremendous. And as much as I'm enjoying, reliving my childhood, that is a lot to get through in like even 2 or 3 sittings. Our average reading is like 5 issues, maybe 110 pages. If it's 6, maybe 132. We're talking 5 times that. Even I have a life. So, I mean, it's one of those stories that's hard for me to recommend to people as like, this is where you get good insight on X, Y, and Z, because you would have to dig deep to get that exact insight. I think it'd be easier for people to read the final issues, except the problem is, even if you skip to the point where it involves primarily Mister Sinister and the Marauders, you may not understand why the characters that have come through to this point look so haggard. The X-Men are really still suffering from the effects of their corruptions. So you may not understand why they look like they've been run through a ringer even though they're running into this fight. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to understand this from top to bottom. And this is also where, even though Excalibur never met the X-Men or X-Factor head-on, Excalibur itself got dragged into this event. Believe it or not, Rachel Summers was put offline by this event when she was turned to a mannequin.
Mannequin.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly the reason why, but I believe the Demons of Limbo just found her powers too wild and uncontrollable to understand or just deal with, so they decided to change her into a mannequin and leave her in a storefront window.
I'm writing some terrible 80s movies now.
Well, it wasn't near as kitschy because Rachel was awake during this period.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, when she got out, she was livid, but Excalibur didn't manage to rescue her until near the end of the Inferno event, so nobody really understood what happened, why it happened, or who stopped it. All Excalibur was left to do was just kind of lick their wounds and go back to England. And this involved Shadowcat and Nightcrawler, who hadn't seen the X-Men since their injuries as a result of the Mutant Massacre storyline. So it was kind of personal. It was really interesting to see how everybody reacted to the weird stimulus of this demonic possession everybody was going through. And when I say lasting effects, it took Roderick Kingsley forever to get the demon that was within him exorcised. He stayed demonic for a significant amount of time. And even when that demon was freed, it gained its own personality and started to run around as the Demo Goblin. I believe the first time it was seen very actively was during the Maximum Carnage storyline. Spider-Man comics.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's had any serious lasting effects for the Marauders. And the X-Men eventually did get better, but they went through some permutations that pretty much made the effects of Inferno look like child's play. When don't they, right?
Yeah.
So that is a large amount of it. What do you think of all that?
Seems like hell.
Oh, you could at least try. It's a complicated story. I mean, I can't say it aged terribly well. It was the end of the 80s, and it was when comics started to make a shift into 90s storytelling. But at the same time, it's kind of strange, because I feel like Inferno itself is relatively important. I mean, imagine Madeline Pryor, not just as a Goblin Queen, but corrupting Havoc into the Goblin Prince. He was standing by her side for a significant amount of time. So, you can kind of see why everything was difficult on everybody involved. There wasn't anybody who could just say they got out of this clean. I mean, shoot, I'm looking at a scene where Longshot is frustrated because he keeps trying to stick Iceman with knives, and Iceman's just throwing snowballs at his head. Well, what can I say? Iceman's always had a peculiar sense of humor about what he can do.
Yeah, sure. I guess the question is how is this going to affect the current storytelling? What repercussions of this will seep through to now?
Well, the immediate answer would probably be the Hellions series that's coming up soon, right?
Maybe.
Well, I mean, it involves Mister Sinister and Scalp Hunter. And one of the primary villains that we already know of as a result of the solicits is the Goblin Queen herself, Madeline Pryor. We also know that Inferno is one of the watchwords in Sinister's teases as to the future of Krakoa. And as a matter of fact, there's a number of characters on the Hellions that dealt directly with Inferno.
Havoc is on there.
Yes. Madeline Pryor's former boyfriend? Yes. Psylocke Quanon, if she has any of the memories of Betsy Braddock's time in Inferno. And actually, the Nanny and the Orphan Maker were there during the Inferno preamble tie-ins. They were trying to kidnap children to make their own little mutant family at the same time demons were trying to kidnap babies. They ran across each other. They just didn't know what was going on. So there's actually a lot of the characters of Hellions had direct contact with the Inferno event. I get a feeling this is going to play a major part in it all. There's also the question, I mean, Madeline Pryor's been back in the comics a few times, but she's normally just been called Madeline Pryor. She hasn't used the Goblin Queen name since Inferno, so if she's using that again, has she reconnected with Magix? Has she reconnected with Nastier?
How does she feel about it?
I don't know. It just occurred to me, what if Madeline Pryor ever, and I mean ever, meets Kid Cable?
Strange enough, that was on the back of my mind, but I didn't think it was as big of a deal until you just spout it out.
Well, I mean, that is his physical mother. Jean Grey is his mother in spirit, but Madeline Pryor is the one that actually gave birth to him.
That'll be an interesting encounter, actually.
Yeah, it could lead to a lot. So there are some far-reaching implications here, and not all of them are anywhere near cuddly. So I do expect a lot to come from this. It's just a matter of seeing how it unfolds. And it's also one of those cases where, even though Inferno had some far-reaching effects at the time, a lot of writers don't refer to it very often. So it's a matter of finding out how this could affect people down the road. Or even if the Hellions writers are even that aware of it. We'll have to see. I don't know if they're picking characters just because they're convenient names, or if they have an idea as to use the Inferno event. You know?
Hard to say, but yeah, again, the Inferno this is the first. I've only ever heard of it now, and this is the first time we got a full lowdown of what the event really was. Mm-hmm. Even then, it's like, why did I know this before?
Well, like I said, it was the first event I was really aware of in X-Men comics, just because it was when I dropped in. It's really hard to look at it and say, this is where you need to get involved. Why? Because it's demons attacking the Earth for almost a year's worth of comics.
And why? Yeah,
it's like, that's where it gets complicated. So, I think it's good reading. It's just hard for me to say, this is where you need to start. I'm sure a lot of it wouldn't make sense unless you already knew half of what was going on.
Yeah.
Right. I have an idea as to what to talk about next, but I wanted to run it by you real quick, because it gets a little weird.
All right.
So, the idea I had was that we should check out one of the D-list X-Men. We've talked about a few C's and B's.
Okay.
There's a character named Stacy X. You aware of this one?
New Mutants?
No,
or
actually.
Static?
No, she was an X-Man.
Huh.
Stacy X didn't appear in a whole lot of comics. There was some fan pushback on this character. But she feels like something that could have, if she was introduced today, would have had better legs. She started out as a prostitute in the comics, believe it or not.
All right.
I'm not saying that it's the titillation or anything, but I think as a society we've come a little more aware that prostitutes aren't always made or they're not always voluntary. You know, it's not like they got into sex work because they wanted to. There are some people who are enslaved and forced into it. And I just wanted to explore the history of this character, not because she interests me in the respect of just being an X-Man, but because it's one of those things that we understand more of the nuance of today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
All right. So next week we'll talk about Stacy X. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you feel like you learned something today. And next week we're going to talk about an X-Man I don't think I've talked with a lot of people about. I am Jeremy.
And I am Jesse.
And you have just been expertly informed.